Hi there, and welcome to Real Estate Divas. Today we are talking about the benefits of moving to Puerto Rico right after this. Hi there, and welcome back to Real Estate Divas. I'm Jay Lee Thompson, and this is my lovely co-host,
Kristen Gerst.
And we're here to talk about Puerto Rico.
Moving to Puerto Rico.
Moving to Puerto Rico, the tax advantages, the real estate advantages, all the advantages, because I'm quite confident just about everybody out there over the last year has heard something about Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
Tell me I'm wrong.
No, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I mean, offhand, yeah. And again, you and I have talked about this off camera a bunch. I'm shopping for Caribbean property. I already have my island picked out that I want.
Yep.
But, when you're looking at where can you go in the Caribbean compared to other locations, Puerto Rico is super nice because it's a territory of the United States and you're not worried about the government, completely falling apart and then seizing all expatriates' property.
It makes for a very easy transaction, right?
Yes.
Because of that fact alone, because Americans can be very, very wary of buying properties in other countries. But like as we've talked about with the expat communities, down in Mexico, even though a lot of people get very apprehensive about using Mexico because you've got to have a Mexican trustee and you've got to go through their banks, and it's a different kind of financing. Whereas Puerto Rico, being a U.S. territory, well, it's about the same financing. You can get a conventional loan. It's the same process.
They have Bank of America there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So we're not talking about, even though it would be great to actually speak Spanish because that town is, or that island is very, very, Spanish dominated. A lot of people speak English, but that would be helpful. But it's not necessary
to speak
Spanish in order to get the transaction done. It's not necessary to have a translator to get that transaction done. But there's a lot of big, big benefits. And the reason we're seeing so many people go and check out Puerto Rico is because of these huge tax benefits.
Now, to get the tax benefits, you have to basically say that you are moving there.
Well, yeah, and it's not basically like you full on, you're moving there. Like we're moving there.
That's a commitment.
That's a commitment. That's a 6 month out of the year commitment.
Does that have to be concurrent?
It does not have to be concurrent. So the 6 months out of the year is kind of like whenever we were talking about a HEHEC, where Canadians have to be in Canada, not so that they don't lose their Canadian citizenship. They have to be back in Canada for at least 6 months out of the year. And so in order to keep that dual, whereas they're not getting any residence in Mexico whenever they're down there. In Puerto Rico, you would be a Puerto Rican resident, but you would still have your U.S. citizenship. So you're not having to get rid of that citizenship. A lot of these expats, whenever they go other places, they're getting rid of, they're what's the word that I couldn't say earlier? The
Expatriation?
Yes, that one, the expatriation. You're not having to deal with that, and so therefore you're not having to deal with the extra taxes that are put on you because now you've become an expatriate. I know that you have a little bit of experience with that.
I do.
Okay.
I do, and my father did expatriate taxation. That was his specialty as a CPA.
Wow.
And he did it for Amoco and British Petroleum.
Wow.
For all of the executives placed all over the world. So I grew up hearing about all of the tax benefits and how you do it. Most people don't give up their U.S. citizenship while they're living overseas, and they might be overseas for 5 or 10 years.
Exactly. But they are paying a different tax rate because of that.
They are, which is why if you're going to do this, you really do need to consult a CPA and a tax specialist who has knowledge of all the expatriate tax laws.
Exactly.
When you're looking at that. And as far as, okay, so you have to go stay 6 months. Do you need a passport to travel to Puerto Rico?
Puerto Rico being a U.S., I mean,
No.
yeah.
So would they actually have records of how many days?
Oh yeah, they're coming down really hard on that. Really hard on that. Like if you do any research right now and you're trying to find out, all right, well, is there any willy-nilly? What can I do here? Is there any sliding by with maybe just 3 months or whatever? Now, whenever they had the hurricane down in Puerto Rico, the Puerto Rican government gave a window of like a write off to everybody who is a U.S. citizen over there, that they only had to be in the country like 104 days or something, or 114. It was something like that.
Instead of the 183.
Yes, yeah. And so it was, sliced almost in half, so that you're only over there 3 months out of the year because, I mean, the hurricane demolished everything. And I think even then they got to pass on a little bit more. But now that there have been so many people in a certain tax bracket going over to Puerto Rico and then becoming a resident of Puerto Rico, then they're coming down really hard. If you want all the tax benefits that go along with that, then you're going to definitely have to prove that you're there.
What are some of the major tax benefits?
So some of the major tax benefits are the fact that once you move there, once you claim your residency, you don't have to pay, there's no capital gains.
None.
None.
Wow.
No capital gain on anything that you have, even if you have U.S. properties, interest on different dividends, whatever. You're not paying anything on those as long as the money's being made after you become a resident.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's several requirements in order to qualify for this.
You got to be Puerto Rican.
No. No, that's not one of them. But you got to become a Puerto Rican resident, and that takes an application. So you do have to apply. You have to submit all of your forms. There is a $5,000 deposit that has to be made, and then you have to obtain a residence there, some sort of permanent residence. And then they also check to make sure that you don't have any, what is it that they call it? That basically they want to make sure that your spouse isn't still living in the U.S. and your intention is not really to live there and contribute to the economy.
And so that's really the goal of this, is they're giving huge tax breaks so that you will go there and contribute. You are going to buy a house, and you are going to become
a part of the community and help contribute to the growth of their economy, which some people are very, very serious about that. Some people are very dedicated to that, and they see that there's a tax advantage for being there, and they want to contribute because the better the community, the better for them, all of the above. And then others, as you might imagine, are like, well, if it's voluntary,
right?
Here's a few $1,000, but that's basically pennies of what they would be paying if they were a resident anywhere else.
Right.
So anyway, it's really extremely interesting.
Are you still paying your U.S. taxes, or you're not paying U.S. taxes at all?
No, you're a resident of Puerto Rico, and now you are paying what Puerto Rico requires. So as long as, like anything prior to getting approved as a Puerto Rican resident, you're paying U.S. tax laws, everything. But as long as you're abiding by what is required to become and stay a U.S. or a Puerto Rican resident, then you are just subject to their tax laws. And basically the incentive is that until 2035, you can come there, apply to be a resident, once approved, abide by their rules, and you are pretty much tax exempt.
Wow. So the tax breaks are huge. What's the cost of living like down there?
The cost of living, you're on an island. It's not substantially lower. It would be about the same, depending on where you are in the island. And as you can imagine, most of the people who move there are of a certain tax bracket, that they are living in very, very nice neighborhoods, or they're living in the Ritz-Carlton that has, I don't know how many different condos that are permanent residents where everything's in-house. But you're paying less for that lifestyle there than what you would be here in the States. And then there's a ton of, like, I just looked at some of the, I just pulled up Zillow today just to see what was available in Puerto Rico. What do those houses look like? What does a $250,000 house look like? And those houses, we're talking about a couple of blocks from the beach. They're nicely renovated, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It's 2,100 square feet for $250,000. And
Which
I'm
is
on
great.
Yeah.
And a couple blocks from the beach.
And a couple of blocks from the beach. Yeah. I mean, there are also a ton of opportunity if you're investors. You and I have talked about this before when it came to Puerto Rico. Because of the hurricane and because of their economy, there's a lot of houses out there that.
Well, and this brings up another point that's always in the back of my head. Their electrical grid.
Yes.
Their electrical company actually bankrupted. And I think there's a good part of that island that might not even have power or roads or any infrastructure. I saw a news report where people were sending some type of basket on a rope across this river and gorge, to get supplies to their little village that's cut off from the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and that still goes on. That's what I'm talking about. There's a definite differential in
but
what.
if you're doing this, it's probably to escape, you're a high net worth individual, and where the Ritz-Carlton is, I'm assuming they have power and water.
They never lost power. They never lost power.
Of course they didn't.
But I mean, that community is fairly, they've built their own little fundraiser, society or whatever to try to educate everybody on the tax laws, make sure they stay in line, and really and truly to encourage them to contribute to Puerto Rico's infrastructure, because ultimately what you do for them is only going to benefit you in the long run. So there are individuals that have moved there that are working on that, but then, for every one, there's probably 10 that
that
just
are lazy
there
freeloaders.
Well, they're just to take advantage of the tax benefits, which is sad, because if they're gonna offer that much to you, then you really should try to contribute to your environment.
Sure.
But
so what's the cost
of
just to become a Puerto Rican resident?
the cost is basically $5,000.
And that's it.
Yeah. I mean, because you're doing different, like when we were talking about being an expatriate and moving to some of these other places like Portugal or Spain, or,
Sure.
They all have a fee. Everybody has a fee if they want to, if they're going to allow foreigners to purchase property. And so $5,000 is super cheap. I think Portugal is much higher. I think it's probably somewhere around $50,000, but that goes towards something.
But you're also not necessarily becoming a resident of Portugal.
Exactly.
So this is slightly different.
This is different, and you're subject to these tax breaks.
And you're good. I mean, and this is something that is good for U.S. citizens.
Yeah.
Since it already is a U.S. territory.
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's a slightly different thing. Are we going to be seeing more millionaires and billionaires expatriating to? I don't even know that you call it expatriating because it is a U.S. territory, but moving to and becoming residents of Puerto Rico to escape. Because I think everybody knows our taxes are going to be increased in the coming years.
Absolutely.
And they are trying to close loopholes for billionaires.
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's already happening. I mean, you and I know of quite a few who have just gone out and they're starting to scout. And it's for this reason exactly. but yeah, I think it's 15 years. It's a 15-year net out there to take advantage of these tax benefits and get qualified for it. So I anticipate, I mean, this was just approved in 2020. They filed the law in 2019, and then it was approved January 1st, 2020. So now this has been going on for a little over a year and a half, and I've already seen, I don't know the number or the percentage of people that have moved there from the U.S. to take advantage of this, but it's substantial enough to get quite a bit of attention from
and to get
media
press
and yeah,
press on it. Well, and I mean, and it is interesting, especially since it is brand new, and they're talking about in some cases making some tax laws retroactive, which is frightening.
Yes.
Especially if it's coming down for next year. Okay, well, what am I going to do differently next year, and how do I make changes? But if something could get passed and you could be taxed for what you're doing currently, yeah, it's a little nerve-wracking. I would imagine people will take advantage of this.
Absolutely. Well, and not only that, and not only do they have the individual incentives to move there and become a Puerto Rican resident, they also, Chapter 3 of that bill is that it's directly towards business owners, corporations, and that sort of thing. If they move their business to the island, then they are taxed at 4%.
That is insane.
4%.
4% is so low.
It's so low.
But
their hope is
tax rate.
that corporations will move there. They'll hire Puerto Ricans, and Puerto Ricans will make a better wage, and it'll benefit everybody. We'll see. As a lot of people out there know, that trickle down doesn't exactly work well.
I am a big believer in having a lower corporate tax rate because it does attract business.
It can.
Which is why Texas attracts
No, I get that. So much
many
business.
businesses because we are at a 0% corporate tax rate.
Yep.
And there are tons of incentives. So you can see it on a micro scale. You can, with other countries' luxury taxes.
Yes.
So you've got all of these nations that have a luxury tax, which does not exist in the United States. So if they have the means, they can set up an LLC in, say, Delaware.
Mm-hmm.
They have an attorney who serves as the executor or whatever of that company, the executive of it, and thus they avoid having their yacht taxed.
Yeah, taxed.
Which is why you see even in the Mediterranean, so many American flags flying on vessels. You do. When you're just out on the Med on a yacht, you will see the American flag because we have no luxury tax.
Huh. Well, that I wasn't aware of because I have never looked into yachts. So
Yachting?
No, not much of a yachter.
I intend on being more of a yachter in my future.
I don't know that yachter is a word. Anyone? Yachter?
Yachter. Believe it is. I enjoy yachting.
Yeah.
Yachting.
Yacht enthusiast. But I will say that the feds are definitely, they're paying attention to if you're abiding by all of the requirements to consider yourself a Puerto Rican resident. And so you need to do it by the T, because I know there was a lot of press of millionaires. They just drop down, get out, buy a coffee, keep that receipt of the coffee that's considered they were there, and go on to whatever island, or wherever they were. Just come in, fly in, and they're there for 5 minutes.
Okay, so
and that's not the intention.
Saying that is not the intention. I understand that.
So
but
that
you almost need a private plane if you're really gonna skirt.
Yep. Exactly.
And not be on a manifest anywhere.
Yeah. So that's the deal on the Puerto Rican thing. You and I were like, what is going on
with that?
Because we've seen so many people. And so I'm glad we decided to take kind of a deep dive of what is it exactly. And it wasn't that, it's like 6 bullet points of this is what you have to do to be a Puerto Rican resident. And while, yes.
And let's be honest, it's a Caribbean island. Mm-hmm. And it's beautiful.
Beautiful.
And I mean, San Juan is, you drop down in San Juan and everything is manicured and gorgeous, and you feel like you're
They have some
on a tropical
gorgeous,
resort.
gorgeous,
I mean,
gorgeous. Well, you are on a. I mean, it's tropical.
It's a tropical
and
resort.
you have
Yeah.
the jungle there on the center of the island. You've got the beaches. You know, I mean, it's gorgeous.
So I mean, it's not like you're going to Siberia or
yeah,
anything.
or some desert island with one palm tree. And there are amenities, and most of the communities that you would be moving into are really nice communities. So
They got Chick-fil-A over there?
I do not know. I do not know. I wouldn't be surprised. But if you have moved there, or if you're checking it out, drop us some comments and let us know, what's your experience.
If
what
you
have you
family from Puerto Rico?
Yeah.
I mean, because this law has got to be kind of exciting. They've all got to know about it.
Well, yes, but there was one interview that I looked into that I was, reading. I say looked into. I was reading, and the interviewer interviewed some of the Puerto Ricans there, and they're like, well, these people, unless they send, because they have everybody doing their jobs for them. There's a Puerto Rican company that she's like, this is how I make my money. I have an errand business, and we do all of their errands. All of the U.S. citizens that are now Puerto Rican residents, they pay us to run their errands. And
that's a thing?
That's a thing.
That's a great thing.
And so regular, like the person working the convenience store or whatever, he's like, I make $7.50 an hour. I don't see any of that money.
Right.
So there's a lot of people where it doesn't affect them whatsoever, and they don't really see the benefit. And that's the disheartening part about what's going on there, is because it is making that gap really, really wide.
But let's be honest though, we've had 2020 kind of as a wash. I mean, you can't.
Yep.
That's the year of COVID and quarantine, and nobody's really,
Yep.
shelter in place. Nobody's going anywhere.
Yep.
So really, this is kind of the first year, and really right now, the first quarter of being able to
Yeah,
really
it's the beginning. So
start
who
that.
knows?
And
5 years from now,
maybe
might
we'll
have a different story.
Right. I mean,
know?
and if you have a ton of people moving there, an influx, they're going to see residual benefits from that. Wages are going to go up.
Yep.
Because they will need more workers, and we're seeing that right now with the labor shortage.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll have to do a follow-up on this. Maybe a follow-up and a trip.
I will do the trip.
You'll do the follow-up too.
I will do the
Come on
follow-up,
now.
But I'm in for the trip.
All right. Well, like I said, if y'all have any stories, or if there's any information that you've been there, you're looking into it, drop a comment. Let us know. We want to hear about it. And as always, thank you for joining Real Estate Divas. I'm J. Lee Thompson, Texel Real Estate and Real Estate Reformation.
And I'm Kristen Gerst with Capricorn Mortgage. And please like, subscribe, follow us, comment, find us on Instagram and Facebook, and we'd love to hear from you.
Have a good one.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.